A warm welcome to everybody from around the world to this fifth webinar, a webinar that reflects the different reports that we're putting out over 2024 that really look at the evidence as to how you can build a better country, a country that works for all children, young people. So within the United Kingdom, we're facing huge challenges to our public services. And those challenges are best encapsulated in the pressures that we're seeing on our National Health Service, a service that is equipped with fantastic facilities, fantastic staff, but which is under huge pressure. And that pressure is coming because of the very, very poor population health that we're experiencing as a country. And we're also experiencing huge levels of inequality, with those inequalities being bad for everybody throughout the UK. Because we have so many people with poor health, they're putting such pressure on our health services that everybody within the whole population is struggling to access the care that they need. So the question is, how do we start addressing these terrible problems playing out across our communities? And the answer has to lie in the next generation. We can't have a continual conveyor belt of inequality. We can't have an ever-increasingly poorly healthy population. We've got to increase the health of our children, young people. And what we're doing over 2024, huge network of individuals from our universities, but from our voluntary sector, from people with lived experiences, from public service, is all coming together to look at the evidence to say, how do we build a better country for children, young people? And what we're doing is we're addressing very specific sort of issues that have been identified as the 12 top priorities by a wide range of stakeholders. And this webinar is based upon the report that is looking at the evidence for how we can improve the population health of children and young people by increasing their physical activity and helping them to eat more healthily. And what we have today is a fantastic set of speakers who are going to tell you the very, very best evidence that exists on how we can shift the dial on these terrible problems. So one of the messages which is coming out loud and clear from all of these webinars is there is hope. There is a real opportunity for us all to work together to give the next generation the very, very best possible start in life. But if we're going to do that, we have to learn from lessons of history. And the lessons of history are that science works. Science can really help us improve outcomes for everybody within a population. And so what we're going to do today is hear from real-world experts who are going to tell you about a plan that will allow us to build a country that works for all children and young people, regardless of their demographics, regardless of their gender, regardless of their ethnicity, a country that will ensure that every child and young person has the very, very best possible start in life. Of course, what that will then do is decrease the pressures on our health system. It will decrease the pressures on our education system. It will allow our universities to work in partnership with our health service providers, our education providers, our social care providers, our police service systems, in order that we're all aligned and all working together effectively so that every child and young person can enjoy good physical health and good mental health. So I'm going to now hand over to Mallory Moorhead, who's the program manager within the Centre for Applied Education Research, who's been leading on these webinars. And Mallory's just going to give us a flavour for the fantastic set of speakers that we've got coming up today that will really help us understand how we're going to work effectively in the best interest of every child and every young person. So over to you, Mallory.
Thank you, Mark. So today I have the privilege of introducing each of our speakers, and we do have a fantastic lineup today and also a packed agenda, which you can see here. We'll hear from a range of speakers, and all of them have contributed to this report in some way. You'll hear more about policy recommendations on evidence related to nutrition and physical activity. We'll hear an overview of various case studies and also hear a word from the end author, who will be sharing her lived experience as it relates to the report. So I'll hand over now to our next speaker. We were planning for Dr. Lucy Eddy to present today, but unfortunately she's unwell. But Dr. Andy Daly-Smith has kindly offered to cover her section. And Andy is a reader in physical activity and healthy childhood at University of Bradford. He serves as co-director of the Center for Applied Education Research, as a research director on Join Us, Move, Play, and also leads on the Wolfson Center for Applied Research Healthy Childhood theme. So I hand over to you now, Andy.
Great, thanks, Mallory, and welcome all the attendees. So before we move into the report itself, I just want to reflect that the report was pulled together by 21 organisations in the north of England, involving both the N8 partnership, but broader universities across the north and organisations outside universities as well. So thank you very much for all your contributions. In terms of the challenge that we face, I looked at some statistics today, and the concerning and kind of alarming state of society is that 300,000 children moved into the low-income bracket. That's an extra 2.5 million people living with food insecurity. But what that means in terms of an educational context, if we pull it down to a class of 30 children, 15 of those children are insufficiently active for their health. 10 of those children are eligible for free school meals. The majority of children are consuming double the amount of sugar that they should be. Up to 5 children may have motor difficulties. And all of these issues affecting our most deprived children within society. So we've got to question, are children actually in the right place to learn when they're in school? So while we might be expecting schools to start to take on some of the health burden, that health burden directly impacts how well children are doing academically. So in the report, there are 3 policy recommendations. The first is to establish whole school approaches. The second is the need to diversify curricula and training. And the third is to prioritise evidence-led co-production. And what do we mean by each of these? In terms of a whole school approach, I won't go into specific examples because many of these will be covered in the case studies towards the end. But what we know from schools is we need to move beyond this one size fits all. We need to look at schools as individual systems because each has a different physical makeup, a different social makeup, and different levels of capabilities and different skill sets. So we need to work with them in a place-based way to help develop their own approaches around physical activity and nutrition. Next, we need to look to diversify the curricula and training. Quite often we hear in Ofsted visits that physical education is not looked at as a kind of core practice. In some schools it is, in many it isn't. But actually we need to move beyond this, and we need to reward schools that are prioritising the health and well-being of their pupils in an equal way to their academic outcomes. But actually, we need change beyond this. We need to actually look to diversify the curricula. In countries such as Norway, where they've just revitalised their educational curricula, there's a strand called Life Mastery, where pupils are understanding personal growth. And is it time that we start to focus on this within the United Kingdom? Finally, we need to move to an evidence-led provision. Quite often in sport and in nutrition, what schools tend to adopt is what's been done down the road by schools down the road. And there's a need to move beyond this approach. So we need to work with communities, and that's about working with the teachers, the pupils, the families, the senior leaders, wider system partners, as well as academics to develop these place-based approaches. So we're bringing knowledge from all parts of the sector. It's important that universities play their role in research and development because they can have a vital role in helping schools to understand what that evidence base is and actually taking all of that vast research literature and distilling it down into easy to understand messages that can help take these whole school approaches within our first recommendation. So moving on to the next presenters, I'll hand back to Mallory to introduce them, and I will see you later on.
Thank you, Andy. So our next speaker is Dr. Ali Fildes, and she is a University Academic Fellow at the University of Leeds, and also holds an honorary Senior Research Associate position at UCL. She serves as Deputy Director of the Gemini Study, which aims to understand the genetic and environmental influences on appetite and growth. She's also part of the NIHR Obesity Policy Research Unit. She'll be providing an evidence review today related to food and nutrition.
Thank you, Mallory, and thank you very much for coming along to this webinar today. As Mallory said, I'm going to be providing some of the evidence behind the nutrition aspect of the review. So yes, I'll be talking today about healthy nutrition and the evidence behind it. And we all know that a healthy diet contains adequate fruits and vegetables and whole grains, and ideally little foods that are, few foods that are high in fat, salt, and sugar. And we know that healthy nutrition is a major public health concern, especially for children. Unfortunately, we're facing quite a lot of challenges in this area currently. We know that the evidence suggests that children are not eating the recommended amount of fruits and vegetables, and then they are in fact eating far more sugar and processed foods than is recommended. And this has quite dire consequences for children's physical, cognitive, social, and emotional development. In terms of these challenges, we're also, as Andy touched upon already, tackling major issues in terms of inequality. And the evidence suggests that we're at a stage when 20% of households with young children can't afford enough food of adequate quality. So this is a major problem of food insecurity, and food insecurity relates to the inability to access sufficient food of adequate quality to meet dietary, nutritional, and social needs. And we know that large numbers of children are living in food insecurity in the UK currently, and these children are less likely to attain healthy nutrition, which in turn impacts their growth and development. And we also know that poor nutrition and food insecurity put children at greater risk of childhood obesity and other consequences. In terms of current programs that exist to reduce inequality, so I don't want to just have a negative spin on this, there is evidence to suggest that there are things that can be done within a school context and outside to massively change the outcomes for some of these children at greatest risk. So in terms of the evidence around some of the existing programs, the Healthy Start Scheme, which it runs in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, it's for pregnant women who are at least 10 weeks pregnant and families with children under 4 years old who are on a low income. And it provides weekly vouchers redeemable against milk, fruits, and vegetables for these families. And the evidence suggests that it really works. And studies have shown that Healthy Start leads to increased spending on fruits and vegetables and has the potential to massively improve the outcomes for some of these children in those years before they start school. However, there are issues with the effectiveness of the scheme due to access and the fact that currently the scheme is only available to families with children up to 4 years, and there's this gap in between this period where children turn 4 and before they start primary school and are eligible for free school meals. There's also issues with the value and reach of the scheme as well. In terms of free school meals are a means-tested government programme designed to ensure that children of school age from low-income families have access to nutritious meals during the school day, and it acts as a nutritional safety net for the most disadvantaged children. And for some children, it's the only hot, nutritious meal that they are going to access in that day. Again, evidence suggests that school meals tend to be more nutritious and contain more fruits and vegetables than packed lunches. And they do have the ability to tackle some of the burden of food insecurity that these families are facing. However, within the school setting, that is. However, again, there's issues with access and eligibility, and it's estimated that 250,000 children are missing out on free school meals due to the opt-in system. And I think Maria is going to be talking a little bit more about free school meals and universal free school meals slightly later on in this webinar. There's also the issue around packed lunch policy. So I've already touched on the fact that on average, packed lunches are less nutritious than the school meal equivalent. But there are no national policies around what parents and families are allowed to provide in packed lunches. And in fact, the cost of packed lunches, providing a healthy packed lunch, has increased massively up by 5%, according to some recent evidence, making it unaffordable for many families. So there has been some research recently to suggest that, strict guidelines on packed lunches, which are provided at a local level, so local packed lunch policies, may result in families feeling stigmatized and reduce school attendance. So policies introduced locally to tackle the issue of less healthy packed lunches need to be done taking a collaborative approach, is the suggestion with families involved in this process. Finally, national school breakfast programs. There is currently in England, the Department for Education funds a national school breakfast program delivered by Family Action. And this is because while breakfast is the most frequently skipped meal of the day, there's strong evidence for the positive benefits of habitual breakfast consumption. And in terms of performance in school, improvements in mood, alertness, and the ability to alleviate hunger, school breakfast programs have shown real promise in this area. Finally, I just wanted to take a slightly more upbeat approach to the final slide and just point out that by tackling nutrition and health in the education setting and across the early years, this would result in healthier, happier children. The evidence suggests that improved nutrition results in better concentration in class, better school attendance, stronger school community, and also we can't forget the importance of the opportunity to try new foods for some children who won't experience this outside of the school setting. That's just a brief overview of the evidence. I'm going to pass back to Mallory now for the next speaker.
Thank you, Ali. Next, we have Dr. Anna Chalkley, who is a Senior Research Fellow in School-Based Physical Activity and Knowledge Exchange at the University of Bradford. And she's acted as an advisor to a range of national and international health promotion agencies, including Public Health England and the World Health Organization. And she's also served on the board of directors for the International Society for Physical Activity and Health. And Anna will now be presenting an evidence review around physical activity.
Fantastic. Thank you for that introduction, Mallory, and really pleased to see Ali's last slide there because there's a theme that's emerging. We know that when it comes to physical activity, that active children are healthier. We have lots of good quality epidemiological evidence now about the profound benefits of physical activity on health. And this table on the screen here is from a rapid review of that evidence that we did in 2015, where we applied a RAG rating to indicate the strength of evidence relating to each of the outcomes of interest. So where green equals those outcomes with consistent evidence, amber where it was inconsistent or from a small number of studies, and red those where we had insufficient evidence. And bearing in mind that this review is now nearly 10 years old, so the evidence base is even stronger. But back then there was a growing body of evidence that pointed to a range of positive outcomes beyond physical health, so that active children are not only healthier, but they're also happier. Based on this evidence, we have national and international now guidelines recommending how active children and young people need to be for optimal health. In 2019, the UK Chief Medical Officers released these guidelines for children and young people from birth to 5 and 5 to 18. And shortly after, these infographics as well. And the key message really that children, school-age children 5 to 18 should engage in an average of 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity a day. But the key message here is that even doing some physical activity is better than none and can still benefit health. Despite this target, we know that currently 53% of children and young people are still insufficiently active, with 2.2 million children and young people doing fewer than an average of 30 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity a day. And worryingly, activity levels are lowest for those in school years 3 to 4, so those ages 7 to 9. And the reason why this is particularly concerning is because there's also evidence to demonstrate that the attitudes, the beliefs and behaviours that are learned during the first 10 years of life show a strong tracking into adulthood. And this is true of physical activity. So basic movement skills in early childhood contribute to physical, to cognitive and to social development. So those children who develop those basic physical literacy skills are more likely to be active into adolescence and are subsequently more active as adults as well. However, those who don't develop this broad foundation will experience something that we call a proficiency barrier. So they're more likely to self-select out of being physically active or are less able to take part in physical activity as they grow older. Worryingly, there's now evidence that this is starting to happen in children as young as 6 years old. So physical activity has the ability and a really important role in setting children on a positive trajectory that can influence the rest of their lives. And this is really where schools have an important role to play. But the reality for children and young people's health and well-being is that it's set against the backdrop of schools that are increasingly under pressure to raise attainment and achievement. Yet, as we've already heard, education and health are inextricably linked. There's evidence from educational research, from psychology and neuroscience that have all demonstrated that physical activity can make a really valuable contribution to educational outcomes as part of the development of the whole child. So physical activity improves people's health and well-being, helps to improve social skills and helps to improve standards, benefiting both the young person and the school. Physical activity contributes to an improved capacity to learn and educational success by helping children to acquire, process, retain and retrieve information better, which is a really strong argument for health interventions in schools. Physical activity can also help create a stronger connection with the school, with more active children showing better attendance and better participation, having improved attitudes and improved behaviour at school. Now, motivations will vary and are likely to change over time, but there are a number of significant and simultaneous influences on children. In terms of physical activity, basic competence and enjoyment are the basic building blocks from which to build this participation, which is why we're calling for a whole school approach, which provides an opportunity to plan and build for sustainable increases in children and young people's physical activity, which can have an impact on their health and their well-being. And Andy will showcase a great example of a programme that we've been working on to do just this. So I'll pause there.
Thank you, Anna. And so now we'll shift our focus to the innovative approaches section of the report. And the report featured 7 case studies in total, but only a handful of those will be presented today. And these include initiatives undertaken with and through education settings to support children and young people to live healthy, active lives. They demonstrate the transformational benefits that could be achieved if the next government committed to improving the health and life chances of children and young people growing up in the UK. You'll soon hear a number of case studies. They'll be focused on nutrition, also on physical activity, and then you'll also hear about a program focused on an assessment of children's motor skills. Our next speaker is Professor Maria Bryant, and she is a professor of public health nutrition based at the University of York and the Bradford Institute for Health Research. She's a nutritionist with over 20 years of experience in research. And she's also the director of nutrition research for Bourne and Bradford, a subsystem lead for early years in schools within the UKRI Fix Our Food program, and the academic lead for diet and obesity evaluation for Better Start Bradford. Today, she'll be presenting a case study on auto-enrollment and universal free school meals.
Thank you, Mallory. Yeah, thank you for inviting me to talk about this. I feel like it's a subject that we are being asked to talk about quite a lot, and I think of all of the projects that I'm working on, it's the one that I am enjoying the impact of the most at the moment. So I'm going to very briefly give you a snapshot of a project that we're doing to support local authorities for auto-enrollment of free school meals. So means tested free school meals, as you've heard, provides a daily hot meal for children, and it also gives some financial support to families. And it's linked to funding for schools, so it also brings in substantial income via pupil premium to the schools. Now, in order to receive a means-tested free school meals, not only do families have to be in receipt of benefit, but they also have to earn less than £7,400 per year. Unfortunately, what we know from relatively old data now is that approximately 10 to 11% of families don't apply. And the other criteria, of course, for getting the free school meals at the moment is an opt-in, where families have to actively put in an application form. And you know, there's a number of different reasons why this might be the case. We learn through our research potentially about issues related to stigma and shame, but there are also barriers in terms of the application forms themselves. Whether this in itself is related through sort of embarrassment of not being able to complete the form or language barriers as well. And thank you for moving my slide forward. I forgot I was having to do that. So next slide. I think you've taken control again. Thank you. Thank you. So we've been working with a number of organisations and also with Sheffield Local Authority to try to support local authorities to set up processes through which they can use existing routine administration data, welfare data, to identify those children who may be entitled to free school meals, contact them to let them know that they will do this on their behalf and register them on their behalf unless they decided that they wouldn't like that. So it's often called auto-enrollment, but it's more of a process, I would say. And in our evaluation, what we're doing, in addition to this kind of action-oriented research, is we're exploring the implementation of that process, what that means for a local authority, potentially to support other areas, but also to think about whether or not it's appropriate for local authorities to be doing this. And this is being done through documentary analysis. We're gathering lots of documents, meeting minutes, DPIAs, business cases, that kind of things from local authorities. But we're also talking to local authorities through interviews with national experts and representatives from schools, plus interviews with families themselves. And then the last thing we're doing is really trying to explore what difference that makes in terms of the number of children who then become registered for free school meals, how much extra funding that brings to the schools, in addition to sort of some of the other things that might happen in terms of meal uptake and the costs that it incurs as well as brings in. And all this work is sort of underpinned by dissemination and advocacy. So unlike the trials that we're involved in, we're able to share some of this information along the way. So very briefly then, so far, we have engaged with 66 local authorities, and you know, we're not actively recruiting these. They're coming to us because they're very keen to do this for their children. And so I'm asked this question quite a bit. You know, it can be a laborious task. We're learning through our data that they are having to overcome many issues, governance issues, legal issues, data issues, but they still are keen to do this because of the benefits that it may bring. When we speak to schools, they also recognise the benefits, and on the whole, so far we've had no negative feedback from all of our interviews with schools and parents, and we're learning that it's one less thing for families to worry about, particularly those who are already in a lot of stress, and that some parents are finding the forms very difficult, and it overcomes that, as I mentioned before. Many parents actually lack the awareness that they're able to do this, and that these benefits are even in place, particularly those who become entitled as more and more families experience food insecurity. And of course, it takes the embarrassment away from parents having to approach the school and admit that they need their help. So to finish, really, in terms of the implementation from this parent, it's a very big help. I mean, if I had to pay for them, free school meals, it would be another expense, which in this cost of living thing has just made it even more important that any kind of saving is a good saving. So I would say it was a godsend, really. I do want to just very quickly let you know, we have looked at data from the first 5 local authorities who have implemented this process, and we're looking at just short of 3,000 additional free school meal places, bringing in just under £5 million of extra pupil premium. So scaled up to 66, we imagine that this is going to have a substantial impact. Thanks, Melanie.
Thank you, Maria. And next we'll hear from Professor Greta de Fater, who's a professor of developmental psychology in the Department of Social Work education, and community well-being at Northumbria University. Greta is the founder and director of the Healthy Living Lab there, and she's spent the last 20 years researching food insecurity, social injustice, school feeding programs, and holiday hunger programs in the UK. She's won a Food Heroes Award from Sustain for her research on school breakfast clubs and holiday hunger programs, and has also served as an advisor to the DFE on these. Greta will now be presenting an overview of the HAF program.
Thank you so much, Mallory, for that kind introduction. So in the webinar so far, we've heard about the importance of schools in supporting both physical activity and pupils' access to healthy, nutritious food to act as a nutritional safety net. But it's equally important to consider that children spend about the same amount of time out of school. So support during the holiday period, especially the long summer holiday period, is essential to look at, because we know from research that during that period, childhood obesity increases. There's a rapid increase in BMI. We also know that physical activity decreases. We know food insecurity increases. And we know that actually children, especially those from more disadvantaged areas, experience significant learning loss, especially in core subjects such as maths and reading. The Holiday Activity and Food Programme, let's see if it goes forward. Okay, here we go. The Holiday Activity and Food Programme is often referred to as HAF, and it's a programme that's funded by the Department for Education and in England, and it covers all 132 higher tier local authorities, and it's run at a cost of about £200 million per year. The programme itself provides children, those normally in receipt of free school meals during the school term, but also some allowance for other children, such as those with SEND, for example, to receive a programme of enriching cultural and physical activity and food that complies to school food standards. We've published numerous articles in this, and we're the first lab to actually publish a Routledge special edition book on holiday hunger in the UK. And I'm going to be talking today about HAF and also about a new programme called HAF Plus, which is a variant of the standard model that aims specifically at teenagers, a group that's often neglected in this debate. So overall in England, HAF supports about 750,000 children and young people. You can see there some of our peer-reviewed published articles on this. It alleviates household strain, alleviates food insecurity, improves children's dietary intake, improves parental well-being and children's physical and mental well-being, increases children's engagement and physical activity, supports what we call connected community. So this is looking at community resilience, reduces antisocial behaviour, improves school readiness, and a summary is available on the link inserted in this slide. In terms of looking at the social return of investment of the HAF programme, we've looked at it in two ways, and this is a case study on an evaluation that we did of Birmingham, which is the largest HAF programme in the country in terms of local authority level. If you look at it per child, it means that for an investment of only £250 per child, the social return on investment is 2,787, so a tenfold increase. Similarly, if you look at a programme level, if you look at the £8 million spent or given to Birmingham City Council in 1 year, the return on investment in 1 year is 89,209,000. So it's a really well-performing programme. However, as with all of these things, there is a weakness in HAF, and the weakness in HAF is that whilst it is really appealing to primary school and middle school children, the number of children or young people in their early teens that are accessing the HAF programme is relatively low compared to the population eligible to access the programme. So in 2022, we worked with over 500 young people from across England, and we invited them to work with us in various areas of the country to co-design a HAF programme that met their needs. And we did this by looking at what was available in their local area, i.e. asset mapping, so looking at a place-based agenda, and also asking people to think about the programme they were designing it for. As a result of that programme, they designed a HAF Plus variant model, that is now being rolled out across all of the boroughs in London through the Mayor's Fund for London, Gateshead Council, Birmingham Council, Newcastle and Northumberland local authorities. However, it's important to point out a few caveats here. First of all, at the moment, the funding for HAP is not guaranteed post-March 2025, and local authorities should be provided with long-term HAP and HAP Plus funding from central government to allow strategic investment both at the local authority level and in children and young people. Investment in young people across the period, not only at school, but when children and young people are not in school, in the form of health and education, will drive positive outcomes, both for children, but for families, and also the wider community and the country in terms of human capital. We suggest that local authorities look at programs that can capitalise on local assets and involve anchor institutions such as universities, not only in terms of actually collating and disseminating the research findings, but also actually providing support for the interventions themselves. And thank you so much, and I'll pass over to Andy. Thank you.
Thank you, Greta. So I previously introduced Andy, but he will now be presenting on CAS, or Creating Active Schools. I'll hand over to you now, Andy.
Great, thank you, Mallory. So Creating Active Schools was developed back in 2019 when we brought 50 stakeholders together from different discipline areas. So we had teachers, head teachers, local authority representatives, some national organisations, researchers and so on. And we came together and co-produced what is now known as the CAS framework. And the CAS framework was the UK's first framework that helped everyone to understand what a whole school approach to physical activity was and what all the component parts needed to be. So this was a seismic shift in the way we were starting to address physical activity within the school system. In terms of the CAS framework itself, which you can see on the slide, the purple elements are around policy. So if you start in the middle of the framework, you can see whole school practice and ethos. So that anything from that downwards is something that takes place in the school, and anything upwards sits in the locality or national system. Anything in red are the environments within which the stakeholders in the school operate. So that's a social environment and also a physical environment. And anything in a yellow colour are the opportunities. So there's 7 opportunities for physical activity within the school ecosystem. The closer to the centre line of the model, the more impactful that opportunity on physical activity. And if you go left of the centre line, it looks at in-school opportunities. And if you go right of the line, it's about out-of-school opportunities that the school can influence. Finally, the boxes in green are the stakeholders within and beyond the school system who support the physical activity provision. So that's anything from the school leaders to the pupils themselves. So the pupils should have a voice in helping to direct whole school physical activity, but also looking to work with stakeholders beyond the school gates as well. So in Bradford, we've been working over the last 5 years through the Sport England local delivery pilot to develop up the Creating Active Schools implementation model, because we needed to take a framework, which ultimately is a pretty picture, and understand how do we turn that into something where we're able to support schools. What was really key through that work was understanding that we need to take a place-based approach with working with schools, because each school is different. There are different contexts, there are different stakeholders with capabilities and different motivations. Every school has a different opportunity for physical activity. So whether you look at the physical environment that surrounds the school buildings, you can see very clearly that some schools have limited playground space and they may be purely concrete, whether other schools have vast grounds and woodland, for example. So what each of those schools can offer their pupils has to differ. So therefore, the programme of support that we provide into the schools needs to enable that place-based approach. So to do this, we developed a national team, and that national team leads the locality team. So in Bradford, that is made up of what we call CAS champions, and CAS champions are recruited from schools themselves. So we look at schools that have got promising practice, and we look to second some of their staff to help us work with other schools. And we work in partnership with the Bradford City Council through the Living Well programme, and they had what we call RIC facilitators. So both of these types of staff were trained up to become CAS champions. And this was to fill a gap in the ecosystem around physical activity in schools, where we recognised that while generally the delivery of physical activity is fairly high quality, what's missing in the physical activity system is that ability to influence at the senior level within schools, to look at creating organisation and cultural change. So we upskilled the facilitators to support schools to enable them to do this. And the programme pulled together four different strands that were funded through different pots of money, whether it was the local delivery pilot, whether it was a council funded programme, or whether it came from a multi-academy trust. So how that programme worked is it's an annual cycle where schools use an online professional development tool to help them understand what their current provision is, where the strengths are, where the weaknesses may be, and then areas where they want to focus and strengthen for the coming year. Those plans are then integrated into the school development plan, and the schools are supported through numerous different mechanisms. Some schools receive funding. They were supported through established communities of practice, through open afternoons, through CAS champion support directly with the schools. CAS has evolved over the last 12 months to include, from this September, will include an online resource bank to enable schools within localities to share resources that they've developed up, but also schools between localities, so across England, as CAS has started to scale into other areas. In terms of the research and the evidence, in terms of the effectiveness and implementation of creating active schools, because it's a place-based approach and it's working in a more of a systems-based way, we're not able to approach this using traditional research methodologies, using randomized control trials, because the CAS organically is spreading throughout the localities that it's within. So we use research to understand how it's been implemented and what the effects of that implementation are, rather than running these kind of traditional research programs. So we've got good evidence of effectiveness in terms of organizational change. So we're seeing the change in cultures in schools. We've got good evidence of effectiveness in terms of understanding the impact on the school culture and also the pupils within the schools. And then we're starting to expand that research to understand how does implementation change as the program starts to embed within a system, and what some of the key challenges that impact that change. So it'll be, no surprise that things like the cost of living crisis are quite an important issue when it comes to whole school change in physical activity. But we're not just working in Bradford, we're also working nationally through the Yorkshire Sport Foundation and predominantly the Active Partnership Network. We're supporting 15 further localities across England. So the programme has scaled beyond Bradford, and we use the online tools and training to support those other localities to implement CAS. And each model looks different. The idea is we provide the tools and the training, and then the locality takes that model on and decides which elements of that approach will work for their particular locality. In terms of the impact, over the last few years, we've started to see that CAS has been signposted in national and international documents and guidance to showcase it as a best case example. So, for example, it was highlighted as a best investment by the International Society for Physical Activity and Health. It was included in the World Health Federation guidance, and more recently has been signposted in 5 of the school case studies around latest physical education guidance. But I just want to highlight an opportunity for people that the conversation doesn't stop there. We've got a really exciting conference in Bradford actually next week. It's come around very quickly, where we've got 300 delegates attending Bradford to further the conversation around whole school physical activity. Thank you, Mallory. Over to you.
Thank you, Andy. And next we'll hear from Nat Merrick. And Nat is a University of Leeds student and a Research and Implementation Fellow within the Center for Applied Education Research, where she is completing her placement year midway through pursuing a psychology degree. Nat's core project has been in supporting the motor skills and physical activity work within care, with a focus on fundamental school movement skills and their role in education. Nat will be presenting now on FUNMOVES.
Thanks, Mallory. So I'm just going to give a short summary on FUNMOVES, which is a tool for identifying and supporting gross motor skill difficulties. So fundamental movement skills are the underlying movements or activities that act as the building blocks for many parts of childhood development, specifically cognitive development, child health, physical activity, and emotional development. Obviously, in the case of this report, we're focusing on physical activity, as children are not able to be physically active without these fundamental movement skills. So the problem we've heard from different clinicians is that referral numbers are too high, waiting lists are taking months and sometimes even a year for them to assess kids. And then once they're coming into this, these referrals are inappropriate. This can be kids who haven't had the opportunity to develop these fundamental movement skills, haven't taken part in the sports or the activities that are needed to develop these skills, and therefore do not have the building blocks for physical activity, rather than experiencing motor skill difficulties. So then we wanted to ask what's feasible for schools. So we completed a national survey with 852 participants, and we found that 42% of these school staff respondents struggled to identify the appropriate fundamental movement skills from a list, so knowledge was quite low. There was also the idea that assessing fundamental movement skills in school would likely increase their workload stress, which currently school staff are under a lot of. Also, less than 10 minutes was identified as an acceptable amount of time to assess a child and their fundamental movement skills. And for reference, the current gold standard motor skill assessment takes an hour per child, so this isn't feasible in schools. And of the school staff that we included as participants, only 15% of their schools currently assessed fundamental movement skills, but 78% felt that knowledge of their pupils' fundamental movement skills would be beneficial for their teaching. So from this, we developed FUNMOVES, which is an assessment and intervention tool for gross motor skills in primary school children. It's done on a 5x5 meter grid, usually placed down in electrical tape in a school hall, and uses 6 fundamental skill activities. The first one is running, so we just ask children to run lengths of the grid in 15 seconds. Then we do jumping and hopping, where children are asked to jump to these specific coloured line on the grid, making sure they can reach that particular point, stop on it, testing their balance. And then we also have throwing and kicking, where children will throw and kick beanbags, trying to get one in each of the boxes in their lane, testing their specific movement skills. And then finally, we have static balance, which is 4 different balance activities, each of them getting harder as they go on. So from this assessment, we create tailored reports for each child, which compares them to children of the same age across a large normative database, not just in their school. So this allows us to compare them to children across the district and across the country, rather than just in their local area. A child that scores in the lowest 15th percentile is highlighted as being at risk, whether that's in a specific activity. In this example, you can see jumping and hopping are highlighted in pink to show that that child is at risk. We also give a total percentile, but even if a child has a sufficient total percentile, we can highlight those tasks where they may be falling behind and highlight those when it comes to intervention activities. So what's the evidence behind FUNMOVES? We found that FUNMOVES is accurately measuring fundamental movement skills and is subjectively a test of gross motor skill, which is what we wanted. And when several teachers were assessing the same children, they agreed on what score they would be given, which also correlated with our advice from our FUNMOVES manual. So teachers are an appropriate population to be carrying out this assessment. And when all the same children completed the movement ABC, the same children were identified as having gross motor skill issues. And since the movement ABC is the current gold standard, this is in support of our tool. So the final thing we're doing is we're testing out some universal intervention materials. We have a school material which teachers can put into place in classroom movement breaks, in PE lessons, on the playground, or wherever they so choose. All of these activities are tiered, so all the kids can complete the same activity, even if some children need to be on an easier tier to other kids. So we're trying to make this a universal fun activities that kids aren't feeling like they're being highlighted for having poor motor skills and just improving those fundamental movement skills. And our other resource is a family resource, which is designed to be used in the everyday. These are activities that can be done in everyday activities such as brushing their teeth, when they're making their packed lunch, when they're walking to school, rather than activities that take up too much time in a day that aren't feasible for families to complete. So if you're interested in FUNMOVES, or if you have any questions, please do send myself or Lucy an email. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Nat. So that's been really helpful, I think, to hear about these different innovative approaches that have been taken. We'll shift now to hearing about the end word of the report. And our next speaker will be Claire Copley. She's an occupational therapist registered with the Health and Care Professions Council and has over 15 years experience of specializing in mental health. She's broadly interested in the co-occurrence of neurodiversity and mental health, but has developed a specific interest in developmental coordination disorder, or DCD, and how lack of or late diagnosis in mental health impact academic outcomes. So today she'll be presenting on her lived experience, and I'll hand over to you now, Claire.
Thank you. Thanks, Mallory. As mentioned, I contributed the end word to the physical activity and health and nutrition report, drawing upon my own lived experience of having DCD and also that of my son, Joe, who is now 13 years old. Of all the roles that I have that Mallory just mentioned, occupational therapist, postgraduate researcher, perhaps the most important part of my life is being the parent of a child with DCD. And having this in my life has also resulted in my own diagnosis of DCD in recent years. So growing up, it's safe to say that I was fairly clumsy and uncoordinated. I struggled with a range of motor skills. I lacked confidence to join in with many of the playground games at school, and I felt particularly shy about activities like dancing and drama. I can remember faking injury to get out of difficult tasks in PE, and I didn't enjoy birthday parties, sports days, school trips, or anything really that meant that I had to be physically active around other people. All of this really impacted my experience of school and my learning more generally. I didn't cope well at all. I became very shy and withdrawn as a child. I spent a lot of time trying to get out of things, and I often opted for the quiet tasks like drawing and colouring. And neither my parents or my teachers questioned that. They were quite happy. I was a good child who was sort of quietly sitting in the shadows, I guess. During secondary school, I had a lot of time off due to illness. I often had headaches, I had sore throats, tummy aches, and I just remember always feeling completely exhausted. As a result of this, I missed a lot of school. I now realise, looking back, that these were actually symptoms of anxiety, as I wasn't coping at all with the physical demands of the school day. I was always tired. I never felt like I knew what was going on, and I was absolutely terrified of being put on the spot, having to speak in front of my classmates or demonstrate anything. By some miracle, I did get to university, albeit through clearing when I was 18 years old, where I made some incredible friends who helped me to be more confident. However, I still couldn't get over the barrier of the shame and embarrassment associated with my own abilities. And while my friends were off joining societies and going to the university gym, I used to joke that I'd never done exercise in my life and I wasn't about to start. So what was the turning point for me? When my oldest son, Joe, was 7 years old, he was diagnosed with DCD. I can remember feeling an absolute overwhelming sense of relief at the time. He was a very clumsy and heavy-handed child, and he started to show signs of not wanting to join in with other children in certain activities. He told us that he didn't feel that he was as good as the other children at PE, and he'd started to become really clingy and tearful at the school gates, not wanting to leave me or his dad. The realisation that there was a reason for Joe's difficulties, and probably my own, gave me an overwhelming determination to ensure that Joseph's experience of physical activity was more positive than my own. As parents, we spent a lot of time and money supporting Joe to try out different activities. Some of them were definitely not for him, and I can definitely remember tennis being very stressful for everyone involved. But he did engage quite successfully with taekwondo, with swimming and football, just to name a few. He had a very patient guitar teacher and still plays guitar now. And his dad did not give up until Joe was able to master bike riding. There was a transformation that we saw in Joe's confidence as he was able to develop more accomplished motor skills and to join in with team games. And as he's gotten older, we've worked with Joe to develop an exercise routine. He attends the local gym, he does workouts at home, and he continues to engage enthusiastically with PE lessons at school, and he's also in a football team locally. We do parkruns as a family, and Joe even helps to coach a junior athletics team. Joe does still struggle with many aspects of daily life and motor skills. He gets tired and he can get emotional, and he often compares himself negatively to his peers, but he will always have a go. And he sees the benefits of physical activity in his everyday life. He realizes that not only does it help his confidence, but it helps him to stay focused and more energized. And he's actually, I would say, doing pretty well right now. He's thriving. And finally, the effort and determination that Joe has shown has been the most inspiring thing for me, and it's helped me to have a go at physical activity. I can finally, in my mid-40s, see the positives of exercise on my own life. I probably feel healthier and stronger mentally than I ever have. I'm still really accident prone, but I've got a sense of confidence about my physical self that I really do deeply regret I didn't achieve sooner. I think all children should have the opportunity to learn the joys and the benefits of engaging with physical activity and to have access to healthy nutrition. And the earlier that these positive habits can be formed, the better. I hope you all agree that the benefits are undeniable. Thanks, Mallory.
Thank you so much, Claire, for joining and for sharing your personal story. I want to thank you again, and also today, all of our speakers, and to those of you who have attended today. I hope you've enjoyed today's webinar and also have left feeling inspired with all that's been presented today. There will be a recording available of the webinar to review and share with your networks. If you have questions or want to contact any speakers, please reach out to carebradford@gmail.com, which is on this slide. And before we leave, I also wanted to encourage everyone to take a look at previous reports, take a look at the full report that's been discussed today. And also just want to say we really appreciate your support of the campaign, the Child of the North and Center for Young Lives campaign. And with the upcoming general election in the UK, we really have a unique opportunity now to urge the next government to prioritize children in their policies and actions. We think this is a crucial moment to make real lasting change. So I'm hoping you might take the time then to scan the QR code there and also go to the page to sign and share our petition, asking the next government to prioritize children and young people. Thank you again for your support and for attending, and we do hope to see you at future webinars. Thank you.